to the Pimp Your Brilliance podcast with Monique Malcolm, a show about creative people leveraging their brilliance to create their own opportunities. I aim to show you what's really possible when you shut down the chorus of fear and lean into your genius zone. You can learn more about this show and subscribe for updates by visiting keepchasingthestars.com/podcast. Hey Star Chasers, this episode of Pimp Your Brilliance is brought to you by the Visionary Journal. The Visionary Journal is a goal-setting guide, mini vision board, and day planner. It provides a simple structure to help you break your goals into actionable steps that you can integrate into your daily life. For more information and to order your own copy of the Visionary Journal, visit keepchasingthestars.com/Visionary Journal. This is episode 21. For more information or for show notes, you can find them at keepchasingthestars.com/21. Hey guys, welcome to another interview. Today I'm chatting with Meg Keene, who is the founder and editor-in-chief of A Practical Wedding, which is a feminist wedding publication that started out as a Blogspot account on her kitchen table 10 years ago. So she's basically like a granny in internet time. A Practical Wedding is the top independently held wedding publication in the world, even larger than Martha Stewart weddings. So, I mean, we're talking about like serious wedding business here. And more recently, she's the founder of The Compact, a feminist summer camp for women and community. Meg has also published 2 creatively named books, A Practical Wedding and A Practical Wedding Planner, both top sellers on the wedding bookshelf. So Meg knows weddings, but more importantly than that, she also knows about blogging and how to bootstrap a business when you don't have money. She knows about building a diverse team. And honestly, she just has some interesting insights about what it is to be an entrepreneur in this day and age. And so I really enjoyed this chat. I think that if you are somebody who has an idea and you just want to get it out there and get started, this is a great episode for you to listen to because Meg has a really cool story. And I think that you should listen. So if you are ready, grab your pens and your notebooks and let's dive in. Hey, Meg, welcome to the show.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here.
I am excited to have you on the show because it's taken forever.
I know, and that is my fault.
But it's all good because you're here now, and that's all that matters. And I know that you're going to have some wonderful things to share with us because that's just who you are. So let's get started at the top. Can you introduce yourself, tell us who you are, and what you do?
I am Meg Keene. I run an online wedding publication called A Practical Wedding. I've been doing it for 10 years as of this month, which seems crazy and makes me like a granny in internet time. And I also recently launched a project called The Compact, which is for women in their 30s and 40s, since we get sort of forgotten in the dust of the BuzzFeed trash bin. And we are launching with Summer Camp for Grown-Ass Women, which is happening in August outside of San Francisco in the mountains in a real-life summer camp. So I'm really excited about that too.
Yay. So let's talk about A Practical Wedding because, as you said, you're basically internet ancient because 10 years is a long time for any website to exist. And I know you guys started out, at this point, you've transitioned from calling yourself a blog to more of a formal publication, but you started out as a blog. Yeah. So why did you start a wedding blog?
So I had been reading blogs since, we don't want to talk about the old days. I started reading blogs every day in 2003. So back then, I was recently thinking about just how little was on the internet back then. There was no Blogger, there was no Blogspot, forget Instagram. I was still on Friendster. So if you had a blog, you basically had to be able to code it yourself or know someone who could code it. So there were just a tiny handful. I stumbled across them by sort of dumb luck and became just super dedicated to the forum, which I remain super dedicated to the forum of sharing our stories online. I think it's particularly powerful for women and for other communities that just don't get a lot of airspace in media. So I went to school for experimental theater at NYU, and I knew that my goal was to have a creative business. And I just wasn't sure how that was going to work out. But I have sort of a weird, rare like even according to personality tests, a very rare personality type, where I'm kind of halfway split between creative and analytical, which means basically I want to do a creative business where I'm not someone who hates the business side. I also really love the business side, and having both of those sides keeps me sane. So wedding blogs started January 1st, 2007. Like the first 2 wedding blogs published their first post on the same day, which is super weird. And I started reading them probably about 6 months after those sites started. And then a year after the first wedding blog started, I got engaged. And my husband actually had the idea. He was like, you've always wanted business, you've always wanted a blog, and you really love wedding blogs, and I've always really loved weddings. So he actually suggested the name and helped me get set up on Blogspot. And it was, of course, a very personal, first-person driven, I'm planning a wedding kind of site at the beginning. And it was really focused on the fact that I did not have $1 trillion to spend, and that's what the wedding industry expects. But when I started it, I did have a very clear internal vision, though I think it wasn't clear externally, that I wanted to try to turn it into a business. And I will say that I think when you have a good idea and you start to put it into practice, there's this sort of frisson or this sense of possibility that happens right away. Every time I've started something where I'm I'm onto something, that very beginning when nobody's going to believe in you except yourself, and you have nothing to show for it, I've always just had that sort of gut level feeling of excitement. And even I would show it to a couple people and those people would be oh, this seems like there's something there. So that's how I started. And I do think that sort of moment of possibility and excitement is really important to look for, because that is how I got to where I am today.
We have to take a side tangent on these questions because I'm really intrigued about what is experimental theater?
So what is experimental theater? It's crazy nude being taught by people who were deep in the 70s in New York City, which was really a crazy stretch because I come from the second poorest city in the United States, which we have the added insult of no one's ever heard of us, right? So we're second poorest to Detroit. And then when you tell people, they're I don't even know what that is. And so we got nothing. So I came from there, and I was an honor student because that's sort of what you did to get a ticket out and get a scholarship. And I got into theater and I really loved it. So I got into NYU, went to New York, which was basically being on the moon. And of course, everyone at NYU the vast majority of people are from really well-off families. And I was just didn't even feel like I spoke the same language. And then I was well, I really want to get into theater. And I somehow landed in the experimental theater program. So it was a little bit jarring. But it actually, I think, really contributes to what I do now, because what I ended up sort of focusing on in that program was essentially personal narrative performance art. And when you think about it, that's basically what I'm doing on the internet. I'm writing personal essays and I'm sort of performing them publicly just in a written form. So it is a super weird thing to have majored in, but kind of delightful and a great conversation starter. And really has, I think, played pretty directly into what I do now.
That's so intriguing because I'm becoming obsessed with people's their non-traditional path to entrepreneurship, particularly people who started out in college and now they have created their own jobs. So that's a neat little tidbit. I wouldn't have even thought to ask you about that.
And I worked in professional theater in New York for a while, and people are crazy. And my now husband and I both were working in professional theater and both had a series of insane bosses, which is pretty much how it goes. Still does. And then I was at an investment bank of all places really briefly, for 3 years. It didn't feel brief at the time when I started the site. So I had a really sort of bizarre route to where I am now.
So I want you to kind of help me settle this debate, because there's this thing online about blogging. So it's 2018. What are your thoughts? Is blogging dead or is it still relevant?
Oh, I mean, my joke is that I come from a truly dying industry, which is theater. And theater is always RIP theater, may it live forever. Theater is called the perpetual invalid because it's always dying. And I feel like the internet is a little bit like that, but we're still so new that we're not used to the drama. Blogging, I mean, who knows? Like as the very limited form that it started out with, that sort of very limited format, is in some ways dead, but I think it's also moved to other platforms like Instagram. But then I think we're also seeing a real shift, like in the past few months with like the Cambridge Analytica scandal, and I left Facebook. A lot of people I know who normally I consider early adopters, right? Like they're in tech, they start things first, are now like early leavers. A lot of people I know are leaving Facebook. And I think Facebook is part of what destroyed a lot of blogging and a lot of publications and a lot of all of that, because you were just reading whatever you saw on your feed. So I have suddenly started being like, oh yeah, I'm going to use my actual bar on my search engine and like type in The Atlantic or type in like different websites or my friends' websites. So I don't know, things are always changing. Like if you work on the internet, that's the one thing that you have to be down with, is that things will never not be changing.
All right, fair enough. All right, so let's get back on track, because I've been asking you all these questions that I didn't plan. This is what happens when people tell me things and I start getting curious about them. But anyway, so at this point, you've been 10 years in a practical wedding. It's gone from blog to publication. You guys are bigger than Martha Stewart's weddings.
Yep.
So I mean, this is a big deal. So since it's grown so much over the years, what are some things that you did to grow it? Like, how did you build this thing?
I mean, it is one of those things where I'm always like, should I say it's dumb luck? And then I think that is sort of profoundly unfair, both to myself and to like other women who are building businesses, because it's, you know, like obviously being in the right place at the right time and having the right idea are important, and like having the resources to say, have a computer to open up and type on. But it's never as easy as just dumb luck. I have built a lot of our business on search, but I've also built a lot of our business on community and engagement. We still have an incredibly robust comment section, which exists almost nowhere else on the internet. Like 200 comment posts are pretty routine. Like we have a couple of those a week. And we have a really like polite, kind, feminist, intersectional, like all of the good things comment section. I think in some ways we're lucky because we're sort of protected. We're like a little bit of a secret garden because we have the word weddings. So a lot of, like, for example, every so often Reddit's like men's rights forums will link to us because like we wrote a post about cultural appropriation and they're mad. But they literally won't even leave a comment because they like are too good to leave a comment on a site that's a wedding blog. So we'll like watch the like traffic pour in, but they don't even like screw up our comment section. So yeah, so we have a business built sort of on search and on community. We're a little bit less built on social, which, sometimes I feel bad about, and other times I'm really grateful for, because social ultimately is a platform that you don't own and you don't control and isn't by a corporation somewhere else. But I do feel like I've sort of built our business on scraps of information that were thrown to me over the years. Like I taught myself how to build a search business based on like, literally I can look back and I'm like, oh, this was like a sentence someone said in my presence here, and like a scrap of information I picked up here. And then I would just go home and like madly research it and teach myself something.
So you've been bootstrapping. Can we talk about that a bit?
Yeah.
Because I recently did a show about that, and this is an issue that I feel like you can never talk about it enough, because the reality is building a business is expensive, but it can be done. I just don't think a lot of people starting out know how.
Yeah.
And once people become established, they don't talk about how they built their business without any money. It's just like, I make it now, so there it is. And I don't think that's fair to people who are starting out. So let's talk about that. How have you been able to bootstrap this?
So I started the business with no money. I think I had, which, at the time I was like, I'm rich, but I think I had $2,000 in the bank, like $2,000 to my name, and a husband who was in law school. So I was supporting both of us. So that's not like, that I was not going to touch that $2,000 in riches. That was for an emergency. And so I never put, until actually literally 3 months ago, I never put a penny into the business that the business didn't make. 3 months ago, I actually did put a little bit of money, which essentially was like I put money back in that the business had made, but I had pulled out to rebuild a website, and I am now like taking that money out again. So it was more of a cash flow thing. And that was also me just deciding that I would rather loan myself money that I'd already made than use a bank loan. So yeah, I never had loans. 2 years ago, I got a business line of credit, which I ended up being glad that I got just for cash flow purposes. But it's a lot of hard work. Sometimes I feel like we underestimate and undersell both how much work and how much time go into building a business, because there is this like myth of instant success, and the stories that you hear are so often the like, I went from 0 to $1 million in like 3 months. And sure, like those stories are out there, but often also keep in mind those stories are sometimes flash in a pan. Like I have gone to talks with people who are like, I went from 0 to $1 million in 3 months, and like 3 years later, I don't think they have a business anymore. So it just was, if we're being totally honest, it was like brutal, grinding work. I was working at an investment bank, which is, if anyone's ever done it, is miserable. I worked 60 hours a week. I have like pumped gas. I have filed medical records in a basement of county hospital. Like I've had some bad jobs, but this job, I would like every quarter I would have 4 separate days where I had to work 28-hour shifts without a break. So that's 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. the next morning with no break. Do not recommend. So I was doing that, and then I was doing this on the side. And so that was another 20 hours a week that I was putting in. So I was basically like, I slept, but that was all I did. And that went on for 3 years, frankly. And then I got a book deal that wasn't, again, like I hear so many stories from friends of like flashy book deals that, pay a ton of money up front. And I did not have that book deal. But I got a like respectable advance that allowed me to have a little extra cushion and an excuse to quit my job. And I quit my job, and my husband, it was the depths of the recession. He just graduated from law school. He didn't have a job. So I was supporting two of us. So it really was like a leap of faith. So I think it's a combination of like, you just work relentlessly. And honestly, like I did nothing but like, I thought about my business when I slept. Like I thought about my business when I was going to sleep. I thought about it when I woke up. I thought about it at work. And I think I'm still like that. And I also think that like when you find a project that you really love and is a great fit, that will just naturally happen. And when that's happening, it's grinding. Like I don't want to undersell the fact that it's like really hard. But it does feel worth it when you're going through it.
See, and one thing that I struggle with when people email me at times about they want to start a business, but they have a full-time job and they have limited time. Like I always am at this place of like, do I just say like, suck it up, buttercup, like this is how it's going to be? Or do I give them like a flowery answer, like you can do it. And, maybe you just do it an hour a week. And a lot of times I skew to the nicer answer, but really the honest answer is like, you just realize it's a season for your life.
Yeah.
And you buckle down and you ride it out.
Exactly.
And that's it.
Which is how, it's how we survive so many things, right? Like at least my business was more established when I had kids, but also like, we also got to talk about the fact, which I feel like doesn't get talked about enough, about like the sacrifices that come with running your own business. Like I have now like what looks like a great luxury, whatever life, but like I also went back to work. I had 2 really difficult pregnancies, 1 C-section, one VBAC where I hemorrhaged and almost died. And both cases, I was back working 8 weeks after birth because like I own a business. That's what it takes. And it's a trade-off that I'm like happy to make. My business is fundamentally like one of my other babies. It's like one of the key parts of my life. But like, yeah, you're just not it's not going to happen if you're doing an hour a week, I don't think. I mean, there are cases where it works, but yeah, I sometimes get frustrated also because I feel like the sort of cases that are trotted out are often the like very idealized cases, or people sort of painting what happened to them in a really rosy light, or not being willing to acknowledge like all of the advantages they had going into it, right? Like now we're at the birth of sort of the like new mommy blogger, which is like the Instagram, essentially like mommy blogger. And people will be like, I don't know how it happened. I just got like 100K followers in a year. And you like look at it and you're like, well, you're like, look like a model. You have children that look like models. The inside of your house is like all like perfectly decorated. Like your kitchen is all like subway tile to the max. like, yeah, I bet. Like, but you basically are living on a set. And I don't want to say that that's easy. Like, God forbid, I actually do not want to make a living as an Instagrammer, like having to take beautiful pictures of my kids every day. But again, I just feel like we need to acknowledge that, like, yeah, a lot of stuff went into that.
And you know what? That's a part of the game. That's a part of the strategy.
Mm-hmm.
That look, that
Mm-hmm.
aesthetic, because that's the ideal that people want to strive for, because that's what we've seen on TV, and that's what we think celebrities have. So that is a whole thing in itself, which I just feel like that could be exhausting. So I mean,
Oh,
I'm recording this right now, and literally there's 3 piles of laundry sitting on the floor
yeah.
that need to be washed, and I'm just like, whatever.
I
I
talked
can't
to
even
an
look at it right now.
Instagrammer. I talked to an Instagrammer at a conference. I'm Gumpy Vague, not that I'm sure they listen to anything, but they were like when I do this, like I'll go change my wardrobe while my child works one-on-one with a photographer that she's the most comfortable with. Like, blah, blah. And like, God bless her, she's making good money, has her hustle. But I was also like, I would like to not ever like have to be doing that and have my child have like a photographer that they're most comfortable with and like 50 wardrobe changes a day. So, it's also just like, what is the reality behind any of these businesses? And so many online businesses, I mean, this is always the case, right? Where we're looking at like someone else's outsides and comparing it to our insides. But online businesses increasingly, especially as we're like more and more Instagram driven, are literally designed to look a certain way. And you're not seeing what's behind the camera or all the work that went into it or any of that.
Exactly. And we could wax poetic about this all day, but I have other things that I want to ask you. So let's talk about how you make money with a practical wedding.
Let's do it.
So how do you? Because inquiring minds want to know.
All right. So we sort of have a three-pronged revenue stream at the moment. It's all ad-based, which is part of why we're launching an event, because I think that for us and for our sanity, it's important to start expanding beyond just sort of like variations on the advertising web-based model. But currently we have display ad revenue, which I know for a lot of people is just sort of not a thing anymore. But we have such a high volume of traffic because of search and weddings that we make really good money on just our display ad revenue. To the point that like, there are days where I'm like, I could shut this whole thing down and just like make more money sitting around making money off my archives and not working. But I would hate that. It would be really boring. And then we have a small business sponsorship program. And that's how the site started. And that was really the only way I made money for probably 5 years, where it's like mom and pop wedding vendors, photographers, etc. And that has interestingly been, as all of the internet has changed and pushed towards Instagram and like Facebook driving traffic and like all of those changes that have happened over the past 5 years. What's frustrating is that has actually been the part where it has gotten harder. Like it's gotten harder to sell mom and pop businesses. It's gotten harder to get people's attention. And, we work really hard at it and we figured out a lot of systems, but it is frustrating to me because 10 years ago, the internet was sort of built to be like, look at this great photographer, or like, hey, I found this person who makes these amazing necklaces, and people can make a living off that. And that has gotten much harder. And then the third prong is that we work with brands doing paid content. And again, we don't have like I would go to conferences and people would be like, brands just throw themselves at you. And that was really not the case for a very long time for us. Brands sort of got into the game online doing parenting stuff and women's lifestyle stuff, and we were neither. And so brands were largely just not interested in working with us. Agencies were not interested in working with us. And so we just slowly built up a book of business over about 5 years. But it was literally like individually building relationships with brands and also trying to do like the best job that we possibly could to prove that they should work with us, because they often had some resistance to working with us. But now that whole business model has grown, and now that there's like influencer marketing agencies, we sort of fall roughly into that. And that has become a bigger part of our business.
Oh, good to know. See, I thought it was mostly ad stuff. I didn't even know about the other brand-based things. So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that. So let's talk about your team, because, you guys say that you guys are a feminist wedding site and it's a whole bunch of badass things happening over there. So talk about your team, because you guys have a pretty diverse team. And for the most part, it's mostly women. I did see a couple of men on your
We
website.
have one man now. And bless him, he's doing the groundwork. He literally is like, we hired a man to do this stuff that we did not want to do, as it should be. But yeah, so we've had an all-women team until about 6 months ago, which is great, particularly because we know that, we are in the Bay Area, so we're like up close and personal with tech and with Silicon Valley. And I believe that more than 50% of businesses are started by women. It's something, significantly more. It's like 60% or something. And 7% of venture capital funding goes to women. And I can't remember the status on like minorities, but it's similar. It's like 5 to 7%. So it's just, it's like egregiously bad. So, which is part of the reason we've always bootstrapped, because, my joke has always been that if I were a man running this business, people would be like, this is so genius. Weddings are like a multi-billion-dollar market. People would be lining up to give us funding. And that has never been the case. And I just have opted over the years to not go after it, because I'm not sure I want to deal with those guys. But so we built a team. It's actually fairly large at this point. I'm never quite sure what our numbers are, because we have multiple part-time people. In office, we have we're both like local in East Oakland and remote. So in office, we have like 3.5 people. And then we have sort of like 5 scattered across the United States. We've also really made a concerted effort over the past 2 years to diversify our team. And we're now more than 50% non-white, which is great. And it's still, we can do better, but it is great. And it'll also just fundamentally changes the quality of work that you produce, frankly, because, and we have a mix of like all sorts of, we have people that are Muslim, and we've had, people with like ability issues. We have queer women, we have straight women. So it is great, because you do have so many perspectives that you can bring to any piece of content that you're writing. And you have so many people that can check sort of any issue. So that's our team right now. And, it is both the hardest thing that I do. Like, being a boss is so glamorized right now. It's like the number of things you can buy with boss on it. And being a boss is like the hardest single thing that I do. I think it's harder than being a parent of 2 small children. But it's also really rewarding. It's not as rewarding as being a parent of 2 small children, but it's very rewarding to build a great team.
And I love your team members. Maddie, oh, she's so fun. And when I met Navja a couple years ago, she was equally fun. So
they're all delights and fun and like wild and out there in their own ways. So it's been a delight.
So let's talk about your new venture, Compact Camp for grown women, because we need a grown woman camp. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. So this is sort of, it's interesting, because I feel like I'm starting this business from really the exact same starting point that I started a practical wedding, which was like, there's something that I need that's not out there. So, and then I always sort of wait around because I'm like, well, someone's going to do it. And then it doesn't happen. And I'm like, well, fine, I'll just do it. But I feel like there's a lack of sort of community and resources, all sorts of stuff for women in their 30s and 40s, because we're like just, I guess, a less sexy marketing demographic. But basically what happened is, so hat tip to Jordan Fernie, who runs Oh Happy Day and now a Happy Day Party Shop and now the Color Factory, who is a friend of mine and also sort of a business idol. Like, she just gives the best advice. So when we were at Alt Summit in February, she gave a little presentation and I was feeling just super burned out and kind of like not sure what was next. And she was talking about how when she launched the party shop, which I remember, like I was there, I was in the warehouse when she first got it set up. She was like, it nearly killed me, which I can fully attest. Like, she was so stressed for a while there. And I remember her being like, I have all of this paper. I have like so much money in paper goods sitting around. And like, if they don't sell, I guess it's just a bonfire. But she said that the process of teaching herself something new really completely sort of revitalized her and gave her new energy and gave her less feeling of burnout. And then she, of course, went on from there to create the Color Factory, which is this sort of it's somewhat like the Museum of Ice Cream, though a little bit more artist driven. And it's in San Francisco. It's amazing. It's like completely sold out for almost a year running now. So I was like, oh, that's it. Like, I have to do something new. I'm at the point where I put in the 10,000 hours on what I do, my day job. And that is like, it's the good and the bad. Like, I'm genuinely really very good at what I do. And I, like, if I'm laying out a post with wedding photos, like, I just instinctively know what photo goes where. And then I like do a little tweak and then it's done. But it also means I'm not learning at the rate that I was. And for me, that's really boring. So we knew we wanted to start something new. And we've been kicking around this idea that we had just internally called Feminist Summer Camp for years. And we didn't want to externally call it Feminist Summer Camp because like, we want to all go relax and have fun together, not like all go sit and talk about feminist theory together, because that sounds awful. But we just were like, what do we need right now? And our feeling was like, we need to get out from behind our screens. We need to be in community with other women. We want to like relax. We want to do things that are fun. We want to get outdoors. It's all the things that sort of having a phone in our hands all the time is stripping from us. So literally we're kind of like, well, we need this. So I guess we're going to create it. So yeah, tickets went on sale this morning at 9 a.m. And they sold out in an hour. So I'm super excited, and we're still putting that together. We're still building the team of who's going to be teaching and still shaping it. But I just think it's going to be phenomenal and so fun. I mean, a lot of hard work, but I'm just genuinely looking forward to it.
And I'm excited. Listen, there's a wait list available. So
there is a wait list available. And I think we may be, depending on what that wait list looks like, we may be able to open up another block of tickets. We sort of we're like, this is our first year, let's not go crazy. But we do have more capacity at that camp. So put yourself on a wait list if you're interested.
So I'll have links in the show notes for you guys to do that if you want to wait list for the compact. So I'm going to switch gears here because we've talked a lot about your business, but I want to talk about some of the things that you have learned over the years. And my first question is, how have you developed the courage to take risks?
Oh, God, that's such an interesting question. I mean, it's partially personality, but I mean, I don't know. I'm curious. You've talked to so many people, and I'm always curious. I did not have a particularly easy childhood. And I didn't come from a lot of money. I mean, like, whatever. We don't have all day. We don't need to get into it. But I think that it does a lot of things to a lot of people. And I have a lot of friends that I'm still very close to who I grew up with. And, it takes many forms. But there's a chunk of us who I think we're type A to begin with, for whom it sort of put us on a path towards like, well, nobody's going to do it for us, so we just have to do it. And I think it's very true that like when you feel that you have less to risk, like you might as well just give it a go. But I also think that like I mean, my Hogwarts house is definitely Gryffindor. Like, I definitely am like, well, you just do it. So I think some of that is inborn, like just being like, well, just take the risk. But I do think have always thought a lot about regrets and like wanting to live my life with as few regrets as possible. And that looks different ways for different people. But for me, that has always meant like I would rather take the risk and try the thing and then see how it goes, right? So this is my second career. I trained in theater. Like that was my dream. That was my love, which has sort of freed me up because when I quit theater, I left a lot of my ego behind, right? So I have written 2 books and I write for a living on the internet and I like only marginally consider myself a writer. Like I just don't take it very seriously, which I think has allowed me a lot of freedom. But I've already failed like pretty hard. Like I put all of my eggs into the basket of theater and then I failed. And I'm in a way that I'm really comfortable with. I was at a reunion for my husband and he also he like double majored, but he majored in theater. And I was someone who was like still sort of trying to make it work in theater and clearly like, not like making a living at it, whatever. And they were like, oh, why did you quit theater? And I was like, oh, or why did you quit acting? And I quit acting long ago. And I was like, oh, I wasn't good enough at it. And they like looked horrified and were like, don't say that about yourself. And I was like, girl, I was not good enough at it. Like that is just stone cold truth. So I think being able to just be like, yeah, it turns out I'm kind of garbage at that and move on, is really freeing.
Wow. I mean, hey, listen, I always say self-awareness is like one of the most important skills you cultivate as an adult, and you cultivated it and you realized and you kept it moving.
And also like now I never have to look back and be like, what would it have been like if I went for it and tried to be an actress? I'm like, I tried it. And here's the funny thing about things where you're like, I'm just not that good at it. Like I was decent, but like I was also in school with like Kristen Bell and, like I was in school with people that are now like movie stars. I wasn't that good. But actually Bryce Dallas Howard, I would name call out as like one of the most talented actresses I've just ever worked with, and she's such a delight. And I was at school with her. But yeah, there's freedom to like when you're not good enough at something, it's frankly not that fun. So when you give yourself permission, be like, I'm going to quit and do something else. It's really nice. And it also, I just think that like career success and I think entrepreneurship success is a lot like, I don't know, roller skating or ice skating, right? Like you're only going to get good if you fall down a lot. And if you're the kind of person who's like, I'm going to get out on the rink and I'm going to do everything I can to make sure I never fall. Like you're never going to fall, but you're probably never going to be good either. So you just got to be like, I'm going to fall down a lot. I'm going to make a mess of it. I'm going to embarrass myself and I'm just going to get up and I'm going to keep going. Cause like, there's nothing. That has always been the case for me. Like there's no other option. Like I'm just like, well, I'm just going to have to figure out how to make it work. That's just my personality. So like, I'm going to fall down a lot and then I'm just going to get up and be like, all right, well, that didn't work. Let's try it again.
And this is a good segue into my next question about entrepreneurial mindset. What types of things have you done to work on that?
Yeah, I mean, I sometimes get like envious in a very unhealthy way when I talk to people who are like, oh, I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs. And because I just like super did not. And I don't have people now I have people in my life, but they're like friends that I've met at conferences. They're people like peers who I can talk to. But I'm not like someone who grew up around a lot of entrepreneurs and like had that drilled into me. In fact, like everyone in my family is like, we're terrible at making money. Like my family's all like academics. They're super smart, but like my sister's an emergency room doctor. Like it's not really like entrepreneurial. So I think, I don't know. I mean, I think it really is just you have to have a single-minded focus that you're just going to make it work. Not that that's like an easy one-size-fits-all solution and it's always going to magically come together. But I do think a lot of it is just like drive. I read somewhere, because people talk about entrepreneurs and risk-taking, and I actually read this really fascinating article that had a study that I've never been able to track down again, which makes me crazy. But it was saying that entrepreneurs actually they're not particularly risky. Entrepreneurs, or at least successful entrepreneurs, take what looks like risks to the outside world, but are actually very smart bets. And so it's just a matter of like having the kind of brain where you know your market or you know your niche. And like, I think all of us should be, particularly women, right, should be creating businesses for our communities. And if you're in an underserved community, which, you know, God knows I came from, like creating businesses that focus on that community because nobody else is, right? It's not like venture capital is. And like, we all understand our own communities and our own communities' needs, whether that's like your online community or your real life community, better than anybody else. So anything that I've ever done, I watched people from the outside think that it was a risk. And I was like, well, there's just like a clear market opportunity here. So I think it's just really all about like not taking wild risks, but taking things that like other people might think are risks, but really is just like what you know is a smart bet.
Ooh, I see. There's some sound bites in there. So at this point, if you had to sum up your entire experience into one big lesson learned, what would that be?
God, that sounds so cheesy, but I do really feel like you're going to fall down a lot. You just got to get up. So, and trust yourself. Also cheesy, possibly, but very true. And I think entrepreneurs have to learn to trust themselves and trust their guts way more than other people. Not only because if you grow a business, you have to like learn to trust yourself when you need to let an employee go, or God forbid, but you know, this happens, like learn to trust yourself before someone embezzles money. Like all this stuff happens, right? So you really have to be able to trust yourself because there's no like authority figure over you who's going to be making decisions. But I do think in the early stage, it is really trusting yourself. And like, particularly as a woman or particularly as a member of an underserved community, you are going to have an idea and everybody's going to tell you it's a bad idea or not have faith in it. But like, and you shouldn't have blind faith in it. But like, you know, if there is like a need in your community. So like, you just have to have the ability to be like, okay, well, you just get back to me when, right? Like, all right, I see that you think that my idea is bad, but you just get back to me when my nail salon is off the ground, or, you know. And like, I work in East Oakland, like deep East Oakland, which is another like very underserved community. And like, I'm busy, I'm at capacity, but I can like look around my community and tell you like 50 needs that are being unmet, including like, there's no grocery store, you know, like really basic stuff. But it's like, it is being like, okay, I see a need, and then I can figure out a way to start meeting that need without having $1 million.
All right. So we're kind of at the end here, but I have two final questions that I'd like to end with. First one is the Pimp Your Brilliance Action Challenge. So that's you giving 3 pieces of advice or tips for someone who is looking to start a blog in 2018.
Ooh. I don't know if you should be starting a blog in 2018, but you need to. I mean, one, you need to be on social. You just have to be. 2, look into your SEO game. Like, I can't tell you how to do it, but like, particularly if you are doing anything that's service-based, and you probably should be doing something that's service-based, figuring out how to leverage search traffic is pretty critical. And then also just build your community. I think people too often are like, I'm going to send in this thing to like the biggest blog in my niche, and maybe you're not going to get any attention. But how I built the site in the early years is I had a bunch of friends that were all starting out at the same time as me. And we all just sort of like lifted each other up. And some of those people have gone on to do totally different things. But then there's like a group of us, like, I don't know if you know Block Shop Textiles, but they're amazing. Like Lily was vlogging, Lily Stockman was vlogging sort of as I was just getting started. Like there's like a crew of us where we're like the 08, 09 OG internet crew. So like, get your crew.
And my final question is, what books are you currently reading or that have blown your mind? And they don't necessarily have to be business-based.
And they are kind of. So I've been reading you are a badass, and particularly you are a badass at making money. I have a lot of money issues growing up without money, trying to like not think of money as a bad thing or the root of all evil, why all poverty exists, whatever. So I've really been working on that because obviously, like, we want women to be able to like access money and have like good feelings about money. My coach is always like, so would you like Beyonce to be like, I don't want to make any money, and like hence like I won't do shows or make albums? And I'm like, yeah, no, okay, I see that is maybe not a bad plan. Like, I want Beyonce to do all of the things. And then I also I've been reading a business book called Small Giants, which is about businesses that have chosen to stay small but leaders in their industry. So it's about the fact that you don't always have to sell or like grow exponentially to be successful. And it highlights a bunch of businesses that have done that. The one that I knew off the top of my head was Ani DeFranco's Righteous Babe Records, which I was a big Ani DeFranco fan in the 90s. And she never signed with a label, and she built her own record company and signed other artists in Buffalo, which is where she's from, which is also another like very sort of poor community, or now, like sort of now that I think the mills left, the steel mills kind of thing. So that that book is like super great, and I absolutely recommend picking up if it sounds good to you.
All right, so I will list those titles in the show notes. And if listeners want to get in contact with you, how can they connect with you on social, your website, the whole nine?
I would. Of course, there's thepracticalwedding.com and thecompact.com, and our social handles for those are what you would expect. But if you want to talk to me directly, I'm on Instagram as Meg Keene. That's probably the best and easiest way. Slide into my DMs, slide into my comments. And I also have a mostly sort of up-to-date website, megkeene.com, and you can message me directly there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for all of the gems that you dropped and just being honest about the realities of your business and, you know, some of the things that you've done so far. So thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
And that's it for this week's episode. Thanks so much for listening. If you love the show, make sure you grab the Be Brilliant guide where I share the keys to success for my most popular guests. Download it at keepchasingthestars.com/brilliant. Now go out there and pimp your brilliance.